Orion nodded grimly, his eyes calmly yet solemnly scanning the ancient battlefield stretching endlessly before them. Exactly. Each decade, warriors gather here to spill even more blood. I doubt anyone even remembers clearly what started this all. Arya softly whispered, her voice filled with sorrow, so many lives wasted, for what? The day gradually slipped toward evening, the oppressive gray skies deepening into hues of orange and crimson. As the sun dipped below the distant horizon, Duke Varian signaled his unit to halt for the night as the rest of the commanders also stopped their respective soldiers. Soldiers swiftly broke formation, spreading out across the flat, barren land, each unit beginning to erect their tents with precision. Soon, hundreds of thousands of small campfires flickered gently across the encampment, casting long, dancing shadows upon the weary faces of warriors preparing themselves for the coming battle. Orion and his companion stepped down from their ornate carriage, each stretching their limbs and quietly observing the soldiers around them. The grim expressions of the common warriors, filled with resignation yet steely determination, were sobering reminders of the cost of war. Even as night approached, the dense, acrid scent of blood lingered oppressively in the air, mingling with the smoke of cooking fires and quiet murmurs of conversation. Soon, Duke Varian approached them, his amber eyes somber and filled with heavy responsibility. The lines of worry and tension upon his face had deepened since their last meeting. He spoke softly, voice steady yet tinged with sorrow. "We'll rest here for tonight. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll reach the battlefield itself." Orion nodded solemnly in acknowledgement, his gaze calmly meeting the Duke's. His companions remained respectfully silent, sensing the heavy burden Duke Varian bore. After a moment of quiet reflection, Orion spoke quietly, "What about the other groups? Are they prepared?" Varian sighed deeply, nodding with confidence. "Yes. The other nobles, mercenaries, and outsiders from other worlds have their own commanders and have taken strategic positions in the army. However, there's uncertainty. No one truly knows how fierce the anomaly's forces will be, nor how prepared the Lionkin are for this battle." Elias folded his arms thoughtfully, his voice quite realistic. "It's difficult to trust foreign groups. Everyone fights for their own purpose here, not just for your kingdom." Varian nodded gravely, acknowledging Elias's concern. "Indeed. That's the greatest uncertainty. Alliances of convenience can fracture under pressure. But we have no choice but to trust that everyone understands the greater threat. Or at least they will fight by our side until that anomaly is defeated." The discussion gradually shifted toward lighter exchanges before Varian excused himself, stepping away to confer quietly with his generals. Orion and his group quickly set about pitching their individual tents, moving efficiently thanks to the training they'd undergone earlier. Arya and Amelia set theirs up swiftly, exchanging quiet, reassuring smiles as they worked side by side. Sylvia erected her tent meticulously. Kale silently pitched his own with calm proficiency, while Philira and Elias finished theirs with practiced ease, occasionally joking softly to relieve the heavy atmosphere. Inside his tent, Orion sat cross-legged upon a meditation mat, eyes closed briefly as he focused inward, gathering his thoughts and mana. After a moment of quiet contemplation, he opened his eyes and carefully reached into his inventory. He retrieved a small vial carved from pale, polished bone, the amber liquid within viscous and shimmering gently in the lantern's soft light. "Master," Lumi's gentle, curious voice echoed softly in his mind, tinged with mild surprise. "Do you plan to take the Drakebone Marrow elixir right now?" Orion's expression turned calm, filled with anticipation as he softly nodded his head. "Yes. With this elixir, I should be able to reach the 6th level of the body path realm. Tomorrow's battle will require every ounce of strength I possess. I can't afford to hold back now." Lumi's presence brightened slightly, filled with quiet approval. "Understood, Master. I'll monitor your condition carefully. Let's succeed together." Orion smiled warmly at Lumi's enthusiastic encouragement, feeling his tension ease slightly at her calming presence. He held the bone-white vial delicately, its polished surface cool against his fingertips. The viscous amber liquid within shimmered softly, radiating a vibrant, potent energy that resonated subtly with his draconic bloodline. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Orion tilted his head back and emptied the contents of the vial in a single, decisive gulp. Immediately, a fierce heat blossomed from his throat, racing downward and rapidly permeating every part of his body. The powerful elixir surged violently through his veins, sending ripples of fiery energy pulsing through him. Without hesitation, Orion swiftly closed his eyes, focusing inward and channeling his soul power according to the intricate methods outlined in the ninefold physique refinement scripture. His breathing slowed, becoming deep and rhythmic as he concentrated on guiding the rampaging energy of the elixir toward his bone marrow, the critical focus of the scripture's sixth stage, bone marrow and circulatory enhancement. The fiery energy from the Drake bone marrow elixir rapidly condensed within his bone marrow, sinking deeply into the core of his skeletal structure. A sensation like molten metal coursing through his bones engulfed him, intensely painful yet invigorating at the same time. Orion maintained his steadfast concentration, harnessing the potent medicinal energy, directing it purposefully into his marrow, methodically cleansing and refining it with utmost precision. As the elixir's effects merged deeply into Orion's bone marrow, another potent reaction erupted simultaneously within his bloodstream. His dormant draconic bloodlines, sensing the rare, potent nourishment, awakened violently, surging forth with insatiable greed. They began voraciously absorbing the elixir's essence, eagerly drawing it into their core in a fervent attempt to evolve further. Orion inwardly noted the familiar yet still remarkable sensation of his draconic lineage stirring within him, the potent bloodline roaring to life, yet he could sense the barriers to its next evolution still remaining distant and formidable. Despite the draconic bloodline's relentless desire, Orion understood clearly they were still far from a complete evolution, though undeniably inching closer with every potent treasure consumed. He redirected his focus, carefully balancing the elixir's energy between his bloodlines and his current task. The dense, radiant energy swiftly spread throughout his body, enhancing his circulatory pathways, cleansing impurities, and significantly increasing the potency and flow of mana within every vein and artery. Beads of sweat formed across Orion's forehead, trickling silently down his brow, a testament to the immense strain of balancing and guiding such formidable forces within him. His breathing grew deeper yet steadier as he methodically integrated the elixir's energy into every part of his being. Slowly but steadily, Orion felt his circulatory system undergoing profound enhancement, his veins and meridians expanding and strengthening, capable now of containing and circulating even greater quantities of pure mana. Throughout the night, Orion continued this painstaking refinement. Outside his tent, silence enveloped the massive encampment, broken only by faint murmurs, occasional clinking armor, and crackling campfires. Within his quiet tent, however, a fierce internal battle of concentration, refinement, and evolution raged silently. Time gradually slipped by unnoticed, the night deepening until dawn began painting faint hints of gray upon the distant horizon. As the first gentle rays of daylight filtered through the seams of his tent, Orion's refinement finally reached completion. His bone marrow and circulatory system had been profoundly transformed, now radiating an intense vitality, strength, and purity far surpassing their previous state. Slowly, Orion opened his eyes, releasing a deep, calm exhale. His dual-colored eyes glowed momentarily, reflecting immense satisfaction and anticipation of the strength he had gained. Lumi's cheerful voice echoed warmly in his mind. "Congratulations, Master. You've successfully broken through to the 6th level. You're even stronger now." Orion smiled gently and wiped off the sweat from his forehead before softly murmuring, "Indeed, it was quite an exciting training session. Now it should be time for..." His voice trailed off, eyes widening slightly in excitement as his gaze was drawn toward a sudden golden glow in front of him. The familiar system screen shimmered brightly, displaying words that filled Orion's heart with anticipation. "One ascended gotcha draw acquired." A small, eager smile crept onto Orion's lips. He rubbed his palms together enthusiastically, eyes sparkling with curiosity and excitement. "Lumi, let's not wait until later. Draw the gotcha right now, perhaps fate will grant us something useful for this battle." Lumi's cheerful voice immediately brightened with enthusiasm, almost bubbling over with excitement. "Yes, Master. I've been waiting for this moment. Greater than over equal to nabla less than over equal to, /. Instantly, a shimmering manifestation of the gotcha wheel materialized within Orion's sea of consciousness, its ornate golden edges glittering brilliantly, engraved with countless runes that radiated mysterious power. A playful and energetic background melody started echoing softly in his ears, the familiar and strangely comforting gotcha BGM, carefully chosen by Lumi for moments precisely like this. Orion leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed intently on the spinning wheel, his heart pounding quietly in anticipation. The wheel accelerated, its colors and runes blending into a hypnotic whirl, illuminated by dazzling streams of ethereal light. Orion held his breath, silently wishing for something capable of turning the tides of the looming battle. Gradually, the wheel slowed down, the runes becoming discernible once more, clicking rhythmically with decreasing speed. Orion's eyes narrowed sharply as it finally came to a halt, settling on one particular glowing segment. As he read the result, Orion raised an eyebrow, his expression complicated and somewhat bemused. He chuckled softly under his breath and murmured quietly, almost amusedly, "Does fate truly not favor me that highly?" Several hours later, Orion and his companions found themselves once again seated within their comfortable carriage, slowly approaching the vast and ancient battlefield. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating their faces gently as they conversed quietly, attempting to ease their nerves in the face of the looming conflict. Duke Varian had visited briefly earlier, his eyes weary yet determined, informing them calmly, "We'll arrive at the battlefield in just a couple of hours. Prepare yourselves." His words, though brief, had carried immense weight, leaving Orion and the others deeply contemplative. Now, as the rhythmic rumbling of wheels and occasional distant shouts from soldiers resonated around them, Elias attempted to lighten the atmosphere slightly, leaning back casually with arms folded, voice relaxed yet thoughtful. "You know, despite all our training and preparation, war still feels like stepping into uncertainty. No matter how strong we've become." Arya smiled gently, her violet eyes compassionate and reassuring. "Indeed, Elias. But we need to gain this experience. The war here is on a much smaller scale compared to the war our continent is fighting against the demons. This battle is not only for us to fight but also to learn how to support and protect each other." Thalira nodded her head with a gentle smile as she spoke resolutely, "We must trust in ourselves and each other. If we can't trust each other here, then who will?" Sylvia nodded her head slowly, her calm expression showing approval at Thalira's words. "Yes, we should trust each other, but we also must not hesitate against enemies now. They might be forced by that strange person, but they have been fighting for centuries. So even if he was here or not, the war would have continued. So we must not show mercy." The rest of the group's expressions hardened, but all of them knew what Sylvia said was the truth. Arya and Thalira were the most affected as both of them had no plans of harming the Lion Kin. However, hearing Sylvia's words, they realized how naive they really were. Orion calmly looked at the group as he knew from the start that mercy was not an option. But he didn't say anything to the group and let them sort out their thoughts on their own. Inwardly, he assessed the condition of his sea of consciousness. Inside, the affinity runes and the other things were in order. Even the dragon breath runes had been completely mended by now. The only thing worrying was the fissures at the corners of his SOC. He slightly frowned, feeling the fissures slowly growing. Looks like the spell didn't affect it much. So I can use them without issue." Lumi's concerned voice echoed in his mind. "But your SOC is leaking mana continuously though, Master." Orion softly chuckled and answered, "Yes, and the passive absorption is cancelling it out. But yes, this is quite troublesome. I need to find a way to repair my SOC fast." The two of them continued their conversation silently inside his sea of consciousness, their exchanges flowing seamlessly. At the front of the expansive column, positioned prominently atop a grand, luxurious war chariot adorned with golden trims and intricate engravings of proud tigers, the aged Tigerkin king sat silently, his imposing presence radiating dominating strength. His once majestic amber fur was now streaked with gray, revealing the heavy burden of age and responsibility he had carried through endless wars. Yet his powerful frame remained fit and muscular, every inch still resonating authority and dignity. Behind him stood 3 dukes, including Duke Varian, each of their expressions grave, their postures respectful yet deeply solemn. They understood fully that today's conflict was unlike those of the past, its outcome uncertain, the stakes unimaginably high. They knew this battle could very well be their last. The old king, eyes locked onto the distant horizon filled with an enormous lionkin army massing menacingly, spoke in a slow, aged voice that carried the heavy weight of decades of regret, determination, and melancholy. The time has finally come. His words hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of what lay ahead. Duke Varian exchanged quiet, knowing glances with his fellow dukes but remained respectfully silent, allowing the king the space to express his thoughts fully. After a brief pause, the king's voice softened slightly, tinged with the quiet sorrow of a ruler forced into an impossible position. If the worst-case scenario unfolds, ensure as many of our young ones escape safely with the outsiders. This war, it's ours to bear. It shouldn't extinguish the flame of our people's future. Immediately, the 3 dukes, Varian included, bowed their heads respectfully, their voices firm and resolute, speaking in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." The king's expression softened briefly, reflecting gratitude and pride toward the dukes who had faithfully served and supported him through countless battles. His gaze then hardened again, returning once more to the approaching lionkin forces, numbering in the millions. The distant sound of marching feet echoed faintly across the wind, a grim reminder of what awaited them. The Tigerkin king took a deep, steadying breath, rising to his full height within the grand chariot. His shoulders straightened with dignity, his aged frame emanating an aura of unwavering resolve. He gently placed his weathered hand upon the ornate railing of the war chariot, murmuring softly, perhaps only to himself, "This battle, one way or another, shall finally bring closure to centuries of bloodshed." The vast battlefield stretched ominously between the 2 colossal armies, its barren expanse scarred by countless battles over centuries. Deep grooves from wagon wheels and siege weapons marked the dusty plains, each one a grim reminder of past conflicts. The air itself seemed heavy, thickened by tension, hatred, and centuries-old grievances. At the rear of the lionkin forces, a lavish war chariot, carved from obsidian and adorned with crimson runes, stood imposingly atop a small hill. Upon it sat the anomaly, his figure tall, lean, yet radiating overwhelming authority. His pale, almost luminescent skin contrasted starkly with the chariot's dark aesthetic, his cold eyes calmly sweeping across the massive Tigerkin army arrayed opposite him. Behind him stood 10 warriors, similar in appearance, each possessing an intimidating aura that matched his own. Their expressions were arrogant, eyes gleaming disdainfully at the army below. Each warrior emanated a brutal, primal strength, ready to be unleashed at a mere word from their leader. To the side of the chariot, subdued and stripped of their pride, stood the lionkin king and his 3 most powerful dukes. Their expressions were bitter, eyes reflecting their suppressed rage and shame. They were here not by choice but compelled by the ruthless being who had conquered their kingdom and taken their youth hostage. The anomaly finally broke his contemplative silence, his voice low and chilling, yet infused with unmistakable confidence. "All of you, go forth and fight to your heart's content. Leave the Tigerkin king to me. That treasure of his, it's rather troublesome." His 10 underlings exchanged swift, knowing glances, each of their expressions showing eagerness and ferocity. Without hesitation, they leapt from the chariot, landing gracefully upon the blood-soaked earth. Their confident steps carried them swiftly to the forefront of the army, an unspoken challenge emanating clearly from their arrogant gazes. Seeing the anomaly's forces move, the lionkin king took a deep, shaky breath, forcibly suppressing his anger and bitterness. He knew that defying the anomaly now meant certain annihilation for his entire race. His only option was to fight and hope for salvation in the chaos. With a heavy step, the lionkin king moved to the front of the ranks. His voice thundered out, echoing clearly across the battlefield, imbued with forced pride and strength, "My soldiers. Towards the final battle we move. For the future of our race, we fight." A deafening roar surged from the millions of lionkin soldiers behind him, their fighting spirits ignited by their king's powerful declaration. The entire battlefield vibrated with their united battle cry, the the sound reverberating across the desolate plains. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, the Tigerkin king silently observed his enemy's movements from his golden war chariot. He nodded once, solemnly, towards Duke Varian and the two other dukes by his side. Understanding the unspoken order, they leapt gracefully from the king's chariot, moving swiftly towards the front of their own army, their faces set with steely resolve. Varian glanced towards the assembled otherworlders, including Orion and his companions, giving them a respectful nod. His voice, though calm, carried authority. The hour has come. Fight with valor and strength. Stand united, and let us end this tragedy today. Orion and his group calmly joined Varian and the dukes, their presence adding quiet reassurance and strength to those around them. Elias cracked his knuckles softly, eyes flashing with anticipation. Arya held her staff firmly, her gentle face set in quiet determination, while NYSS and Sylvia silently radiated confidence. Thalira took a deep breath, steadying herself, and Amelia's expression hardened, ready for combat as her grip tightened on her spear. Kale stood silently, his gaze sharp and focused. Standing alongside Orion and his companions were 5 others from the Thunder Peak Kingdom, their presence clearly equal to Orion's group, yet their authority seemed lower. Composed of 4 men and a single woman, each hailing from prestigious Marquis tier houses, their stern expressions reflected steely determination, tempered by an underlying apprehension at the scale of the conflict unfolding before them. But each of them was confident in their own strength, as the weakest was Tier 6 while a few were Tier 7. Beyond them, other groups of outsiders hesitated, their confidence shaken by the overwhelming pressure radiating from both the Tigerkin and Lionkin forces. Recognizing their limitations, they quietly stepped back, willing to fight against the weaker opponents rather than the top combatants. Orion took a deep, calming breath, his dual-colored eyes sharpening with intense focus as he gazed across the battlefield. The enemy's forces were advancing slowly, led by the 10 ominous generals beneath the Anomaly's command, the Lionkin king, and his 3 powerful dukes, each emanating oppressive, palpable killing intent. Duke Varian and the other Tigerkin dukes also moved forward, meeting their foes' steely gazes with unyielding resolve. Feeling the weight of the moment, Duke Varian's quiet yet commanding voice broke the tense silence. "I'll handle the Lionkin king personally. The rest of you must engage the others. Beware, the Anomaly's generals are extraordinarily strong." Orion nodded, understanding the severity behind Varian's words. His calm gaze met the Duke's amber eyes, quietly appraising him before gently asking, "How confident are you in defeating the Lionkin king?" Varian paused momentarily, his expression briefly betraying his uncertainty before he quietly shook his head, voice heavy with realism, "None at all. That is precisely why I need you to finish your fights quickly. I won't be able to hold him indefinitely." Orion silently admired Varian's honesty. In war, truth was rare, yet this honesty gave them clarity. Orion firmly responded, "Understood. We'll do our best to eliminate our targets swiftly." Varian's eyes softened with quiet gratitude before immediately hardening with determination as his gaze locked onto the approaching enemy ranks. The 10 generals suddenly surged forward, their movements explosive and aggressive, like unleashed beasts. Behind them, the Lionkin dukes and their massive army broke into a furious charge, roaring battle cries shattering the tense stillness. Not to be intimidated, Varian drew his weapon, a gleaming halberd engraved with tiger motifs, and sprang forward, his roar ringing defiantly, "For the Felian kingdom. Fight without fear." With his rallying cry, the Tigerkin dukes charged forward beside him, their powerful auras erupting in synchronization. The ground trembled beneath their feet as both armies hurtled toward each other, closing rapidly, the gap shrinking to mere meters within moments. Orion's companions readied themselves instantly. Elias took out his staff, eyes gleaming fiercely with anticipation, whispering quietly, "This is it." Arya calmly tightened her grip on her ornate staff, murmuring softly, "Stay close and support each other." Sylvia's eyes radiated steely composure, her aura calm yet deadly as she unsheathed her sword. Beside her, NYSS stood calmly, her aura gloomy as she focused intently on the nearest general racing towards them with her scythe in her hand. Amelia and Thalira exchanged a quick, reassuring glance, then steadied their weapons, readying themselves for combat. Kale's expression was tranquil yet alert, his sword glinting sharply in the sunlight. The group of 5 Marquis-tier warriors exchanged resolute glances, nodding silently amongst themselves, determined not to disappoint in this pivotal clash. The instant both armies collided was cataclysmic. A thunderous explosion of sound erupted as steel met steel, magical forces exploded violently, and roars of determination clashed midair. Dust surged upward, momentarily blinding many warriors as chaos reigned on the battlefield. Darien immediately sought out the Lion-Kin king, their eyes meeting fiercely before their weapons collided violently, sending shockwaves rippling outward. Around them, the Tigerkin dukes engaged furiously against their Lion-Kin counterparts, the intensity of their clashes creating turbulent whirlwinds of energy. The instant the two armies collided, the once desolate battlefield exploded into a violent tempest of roaring soldiers, clashing steel, and dazzling spells. Orion felt adrenaline surge through his veins, sharpening his senses and amplifying his resolve. His gaze quickly locked onto a figure barreling towards him. One of the anomaly's generals, tall, muscular, and radiating a primal savagery. The general's skin was an eerie, luminescent gray, and his eyes burned crimson beneath a furrowed brow. In his massive grip, he wielded a pair of intimidating axes, glowing faintly with a corrupted, malevolent aura. Orion dashed forward without hesitation, his dual longswords already shimmering with powerful sword aura, both swords enveloped in blazing red flames. They collided with a resonant crash. The general swung both axes down ferociously, aiming to cleave Orion in half. Orion crossed his dual swords above, barely parrying the powerful blow. The shockwave shattered the earth beneath him, sending debris flying outward. "TCH," Orion muttered under his breath, gritting his teeth. He immediately counterattacked, spinning swiftly, his blades trailing arcs of fire. The enemy general deftly stepped back, avoiding the blazing sweep, a sinister grin forming on his lips. "Interesting. You're stronger than you appear, especially your body," the general rumbled, his deep voice laced with arrogant amusement. "But mere humans can't match me." Orion calmed his breath, quickly assessing the situation. The opponent was clearly an apex warrior, radiating strength equivalent to or even surpassing the peak of Tier 7. To defeat him swiftly, Orion would need every ounce of his strength. Nearby, Arya faced her own daunting opponent alongside Amelia. Arya's violet eyes flickered with determination, her staff radiating soft golden and electric light. Amelia stood at her side, spear crackling with lightning, her aura icy yet focused. Their adversary was a female general, slender yet menacing, her movements disturbingly graceful. Her long silver hair fluttered behind her as she approached, a whip coiled around her hand, filled with dark electricity, pulsing dangerously. Without warning, the female general snapped her whip forward, sending a serpentine bolt of dark thunder toward Arya. Amelia reacted instantly, stepping forward and spinning her spear swiftly. The spear tip burst forth with brilliant blue water aura. The water energies formed a protective barrier, absorbing the corrupted lightning. "Careful, Amelia," Arya called gently, her staff channeling luminous power. She softly chanted, invoking her light element. Her chant finished, a radiant dome of shimmering white enveloped Amelia, enhancing her physical attributes. With newfound speed and agility, Amelia dashed forward, meeting the general's attack head-on. Sparks exploded as lightning clashed against dark thunder, illuminating their battle in stark, electric bursts. Returning focus to his own fight, Orion swiftly dodged another brutal strike. His opponent's raw physical strength was overwhelming, his movements violent yet precise. The general unleashed a relentless flurry of axe strikes, each swing carrying immense force. Orion struggled momentarily, forced onto the defensive. Blocking a strike directly would leave him vulnerable, he could only redirect and evade. Recognizing this disadvantage, he urgently called upon his inner mana, reinforcing his muscles, accelerating his perception. Suddenly, an opening appeared. The general swung horizontally, his axes leaving him momentarily exposed. Orion surged forward, dual swords slicing upward, creating intertwined arcs of flame. The attack struck true, carving shallow gashes across the general's armor, causing him to roar furiously in pain. However, rather than weakening, his enemy seemed invigorated, eyes blazing brighter, his aura intensifying dangerously. "You dare injure me," he snarled, visibly swelling as his muscles expanded grotesquely. A suffocating wave of corrupted mana flooded outward, forcing Orion backward several steps. Realizing the severity of the threat, Orion's expression hardened. No choice left, he thought in annoyance. Time to use that. Orion closed his eyes momentarily, allowing his consciousness to dive deep within himself, resonating with his dormant bloodline. He called forth his true dragon heritage, feeling a blazing heat surge violently from his heart, spreading rapidly throughout his body. An explosive burst of draconic aura erupted around Orion, shrouding him in blinding crimson and gold brilliance. His body rapidly expanded, bones reshaping, muscles multiplying. When the transformation settled, Orion stood 3 meters tall, a mighty dragonoid form, covered in crimson golden scales, powerful claws flexing at his fingertips, draconic wings unfurled proudly behind him. The general's expression twisted into astonishment, swiftly replaced by a dark eagerness. A draconian. Now this has become even more thrilling. The Realm Guardian sword shimmered in response to Orion's transformation, rapidly enlarging to match its wielder's colossal stature. In his other hand, Orion summoned forth a second giant blade, dark silver and exuding raw, primal energy. Looking at Realm Guardian, he silently thanked himself for asking Selene to imprint the enlarging runes on the sword. Taking a deep breath, Orion charged forward with a deafening roar, dual giant swords sweeping in tandem. The general raised both axes quickly, clearly managing to block Orion's powerful strike. But the sheer force of impact sent him skidding backward, feet gouging deep trenches into the earth. The general retaliated fiercely, launching into an aggressive offensive. But Orion, now a towering dragonoid, matched every blow with overwhelming power. The clash between them resonated thunderously across the battlefield, sending shockwaves radiating outward. Nearby, Arya observed Orion's drastic transformation with awe, briefly distracted. Amelia's sharp voice brought her attention back. "Arya, focus." Snapping back, Arya nodded resolutely, channeling a surge of pure thunder mana into her staff. She aimed at the enemy general, chanting rapidly, voice steady and serene, despite the chaos. "Judgment, heavenly thunder." A massive bolt of lightning descended, engulfing their foe in searing brilliance. Amelia capitalized instantly, thrusting her spear coated in crackling lightning. The spearhead pierced the general's defenses, drawing a painful hiss and dark blood. The female general emerged from the massive bolt of thunder and spear barrage, unharmed. She looked at Arya and Amelia calmly, "Only this? Trash." Arya and Amelia looked at each other for a brief moment with slightly alarmed expressions. Amelia took a deep breath as she called forth the help of the spear spirit. "Let's see how you handle this." Meanwhile, Orion felt his new draconic power surging relentlessly within him. Each strike he delivered was stronger, sharper, and carried the unmistakable aura of a true dragon. However, the general matched blow for blow, seemingly becoming stronger with each attack. Not far from Orion's fierce battle, NYSS and Sylvia stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes locked intently on their approaching opponent. The general heading toward them was slender yet unnervingly powerful, cloaked in shadows that writhed like living serpents around his lithe figure. His face was obscured beneath a dark hood, revealing only sinister red eyes gleaming with malice and cold calculation. In his hands, he wielded a dual-bladed spear, pulsing ominously with corrupted shadow energy. Sylvia narrowed her eyes, gripping her longsword tightly. The wind swirled gracefully around her blade, creating faint, invisible currents that gently lifted her hair and robes. Beside her, NYSS stood still and silent, her scythe held casually but ready, faint streaks of shadow coiling around her weapon. "You take the front," NYSS whispered calmly, her icy gaze fixed firmly on the advancing enemy. "I'll flank." Sylvia gave a slight nod of understanding, exhaling slowly as she rushed forward in a blur of speed, the wind augmenting her every movement. With extraordinary agility, she met the general head-on, her sword slashing downward with a burst of compressed wind slicing the air sharply, imbued with her intermediate-grade sword aura. The enemy general effortlessly raised his spear imbued with his own spear aura, intercepting Sylvia's strike with remarkable ease. His deep, unsettling voice echoed beneath the hood, dripping with arrogant mockery. "Speed alone won't save you, mortal." Sylvia raised an eyebrow and retorted, "Are you an immortal that you keep referring to me as mortal?" She twisted her body while spearing, swiftly deflecting his spear's counterstrike with her blade. The sound of clashing weapons resonated crisply, sparks igniting briefly in midair. He smiled creepily, "You wouldn't be wrong to call us immortals." She frowned, but each of her movements remained smooth, swift, and precise, enhanced by her wind affinity. However, despite her impeccable form, the enemy general matched her pace with indifference, shadows wrapping around his weapon, multiplying his speed and power. The general abruptly stepped back, spinning his spear gracefully before thrusting it forward. A spiraling torrent of dark energy erupted, surging towards Sylvia at frightening speed before hitting her sword. "Not so fast," came NYSS's calm, almost chilling voice. She materialized abruptly beside Sylvia, spinning her scythe skillfully as shadows intertwined with the scythe. NYSS slashed horizontally, releasing a devastating crescent wave of shadow that collided violently against the general's dark attack and saved Sylvia from the devastating damage. Sylvia felt the harsh recoil shudder through her arms as she swiftly withdrew from the collision. NYSS stood steady beside her, eyes narrowed, the faintest sheen of perspiration forming on her forehead. Their opponent looked at them quietly from beneath his hood, shadows dancing eerily around him. "Such delicate teamwork," the enemy general mocked, his voice carrying a subtle note of disdain. "But shadows and wind alone will not be enough against me." Sylvia's eyes sharpened. She instantly understood their precarious situation. The enemy was effortlessly matching their pace, parrying their strikes without breaking a sweat. Her wind-enhanced swordplay, while precise and fluid, could barely breach his guard, and NYSS's shadow-infused scythe strikes met a similar fate. "Let's switch," Sylvia called sharply, her voice determined as she suddenly surged forward once more, her longsword igniting with crackling bolts of lightning. She had rapidly switched from wind to thunder, seeking an advantage in sheer speed and raw explosive power. The blade hummed violently, arcs of electricity leaping toward the enemy general in vicious lashes. Simultaneously, NYSS seamlessly shifted her aura, withdrawing shadows and invoking thunder to cloak her scythe. Her movements became sharper, her aura now surging intensely with electric energy. Thunder was among their strongest defensive elements, and both hoped this sudden, synchronized shift would catch the bastard off guard. Sylvia reached the general first, her thunder-infused blade descending swiftly in rapid, merciless arcs. Each strike was more aggressive than before, the lightning aura enhancing the destructive force behind every swing. The general twisted his dual-bladed spear calmly, parrying her assault with ease, yet his footing subtly shifted, betraying slight strain. NYSS seized that faint opportunity, leaping forward, her scythe blazing with dazzling electricity. "Thunder Reaper's judgment," she whispered coldly, releasing a surge of devastating electric energy with a decisive, horizontal sweep aimed directly at their foe's exposed flank. Yet, impossibly, the general pivoted instantly, shadows rippling around him, absorbing the crackling bolts of thunder effortlessly. NYSS's eyes widened momentarily in shock before she immediately retreated, narrowly evading the counterstrike that grazed her shoulder. "Predictable," the general sneered, his voice cold and taunting. "Merely cycling through elements without mastery will only bring your end faster." NYSS bit her lip, frustration flashing through her icy gaze. Sylvia felt an anxious flutter deep in her chest, knowing their desperate gambit had failed miserably. Despite their powerful elemental techniques and precise coordination, they remained unable to penetrate his impeccable defense. The disparity in combat experience was clear. "Let's try again," Sylvia called urgently, shifting back to wind. A powerful gust enveloped her, increasing her agility drastically. At the same instant, NYSS shifted back into shadows, her form becoming blurred and elusive, cloaked in dark mist. They rushed forward simultaneously, interchanging their elemental energies in a gambit, wind and shadow, then thunder and shadow again, each shift an attempt to overwhelm the general's senses and create openings. But each attempt was met by the enemy's unshakable calmness and skillful maneuvers. Their repeated strikes continued to shatter uselessly against his defense, leaving him entirely unharmed. After a particularly fierce exchange, both Sylvia and NYSS stepped back, breathing heavily, their bodies trembling slightly from fatigue. The general, utterly calm, tilted his head slightly, voice dripping with mockery. "I have gone on to fight for hundreds of years under His Majesty, you mere children are nothing. Is that all you had?" NYSS exchanged a glance with Sylvia, an unspoken agreement passing between them. Their current tactics were useless. They needed another plan, quickly, or they would inevitably fall. Not far from them, Elias, Philyra, and Kale found themselves locked in their own intense struggle against a towering, armored general. Unlike his slender companion, this general was built like a mountain, encased entirely in heavy black armor crackling with dark energy. Each heavy step he took shook the earth beneath their feet, forcing the trio into continuous motion. At the forefront, Kale held his longsword firmly, eyes sharp and unwavering. The wind stirred lightly around his blade, heightening his agility as he maneuvered swiftly around the massive enemy, striking decisively and then retreating instantly, wary of the devastating force behind every blow of his enemy's enormous warhammer. "Kale, move!" Elias commanded sharply from behind. Kale instantly dodged to the side, feeling a strange distortion ripple through the space he had just occupied. Elias stood calmly, staff raised, deep concentration etched onto his face. The air around him seemed to warp subtly, revealing the intangible threads of gravity manipulation. "Gravity well, compression," he called powerfully. The armored general faltered slightly, a sudden invisible force crushing down upon him, armor creaking under immense pressure. However, with a furious roar, he flexed his powerful muscles, violently shattering Elias's gravity field with brute strength alone. "Tch," Elias hissed quietly, frustration evident in his narrowed eyes. His opponent's raw physical might alone was negating his gravity spells. The general turned towards him, bellowing deeply as he charged forward, warhammer raised high. "Verdant barrier." Philyra's calm voice rang out clearly, just as Elias braced himself. A vivid, emerald-green barrier materialized instantly in front of Elias, intercepting the mighty blow of the general's warhammer. The earth trembled beneath the forceful impact, yet Philyra's protective spell held firm. "Thank you, Philyra," Elias murmured breathlessly, quickly recomposing himself. "No time to thank me," Philyra replied urgently, her serene eyes sharply focused. She raised her staff gracefully, invoking her wood affinity once again. "Forest's blessing," she whispered gently. Soft emerald light wrapped around Kale, Elias, and herself, refreshing their stamina and reinforcing their physical resilience. Renewed, Kale surged forward, his blade swiftly cutting through the air with deadly precision. "Wind slicer," he called calmly, sending razor-sharp gusts hurtling towards the general's vulnerable joints, carefully targeting gaps in the thick armor. Simultaneously, Elias channeled his mana with extreme focus. "Gravity field, heavy burden," he invoked, surrounding the general in a thick gravitational distortion. Though the enemy resisted, his movements slowed perceptibly, each step becoming visibly labored.